In this video, we will talk about options which you have as a developer to store Forge apps data. There are two main options which we will discuss the most of the time. It's entity properties and Forge storage. Also, I will mention a few more options which are less popular but could be very useful for some exotic cases. We will discuss pros and cons of every option and particular use cases. Let's get started. You have the Forge app, or you're going to build your first Forge app, and you have a question where to store my data. It could be user-related data or some configuration options for your app or content-related data. And basically you have two main options to do it. First of all, it's entity properties. It's something that existed in Jira itself, independent of any app, and this place available through standard REST API, and you can use it to put key-value objects, key-value data, which belongs to some content or user. So it always related to some entity. Which benefits we could get using this option? First of all, as I said, it's a built-in. It means that independent does your app installed on the instance or not, entity properties already there and could be used through standard REST API, via Postman or whatever. The second one, all these entity properties are available across all the apps. So it means that anyone with right permission to a particular entity, for example, issue or page, are able to read entity properties, write them, override them, and even delete them. So it means that your app could put data against user or project, and another app could read this data without any issues. And the third benefit, I would say, it's the ability to index entity property for JQuery search. Of course, it could be especially important for issues. If you add some entity properties for issues and then index it through special Forge module to be searched through JQuery. But not everything so good. We have also some limits, and they are, first of all, the size. I would say it's the biggest problem with entity properties because maximum value size of one entity property only 32 kilobytes. It's okay for some configuration options, but it's definitely not enough for something bigger. Also, entity properties are not secure at all. As I said, anyone with right permission to entity, means to page or issue, are able to delete entity property created by your app. And every app could write in the same entity property storage, so it means you need to be very careful with key of your property. And if you will write something like, I don't know, config, property with name config could be overwritten by any other app, and you doesn't know that happened, and next time when you read it, you can get the wrong data. Also, you cannot store data against your whatever your internal entities not existed in Jira or Confluence. So every entity property related to content existed in your cloud instance. And if Jira issue will be deleted, all the entity properties related to this issue also will be deleted, and so on. Or project, or user, or board. We will have a look at all the options a bit later. So, if you have so many limits, when to use it? Actually, it's still the very good place for something not major, not needed for long-term storage, something like view options, so something that we can lose at any time and our app will still keep on working with default values and users are able to override it. Like default screen which user will see inside your app, which we can store per user. Or some panel view configuration in particular issue, which again could be stored in entity properties of particular issue. or whatever which we are able to lose, and we can always reuse the default values. Let's read a bit more about anti-properties in Jira Cloud and Confluence Cloud. So as I've mentioned already, anti-properties in Jira always related to content and users. When we're talking about content, we always talking about comments, dashboard items, issues, issue types, projects, and workflow transitions. If you're using Jira software, you also are able to use entity properties of boards and sprints and nothing more. So if you would like, I don't know, to store some entity properties against statuses, you don't have options for this. If you would like to store it against work logs, it's the same. You are very limited here. And in these cases, if you need to store data against something else, this option is not for you. You need to find to use another one. It's a standard REST API, which allows you to create, read, update, delete all the entity properties. And from your Forge app, you will do the standard REST calls from front end or back end, doesn't matter. And you can test how entity property looks like through Postman or any other RESTful tool which allows you to use REST API of Jira. And as I mentioned, to make some property available for search through Jekyll, you need to extend your Forge module with this Jira entity property module. It will say Jira that, hey, please index some entity property, and then it enables search through Jekyll using this entity property. Without this model, entity property will not appear in the search. What else? Yeah, always keep in mind the limitations. And I think that's it about entity properties for Jira. Same for Confluence. We have content entity properties and user entity properties. But content in Confluence means pages, blog posts, and spaces. And again, the same limitations for 32 kilobytes, only JSON objects. Anyone who can write the content itself are able to write to entity properties. They're cross-app and anyone is able to access them. And again, the standard REST API, so you can use it for from the front-end part of your Forge app, back-end part, or from third-party tool like Postman. Let's go back to our diagram and talk about the second option which we have. Second option is available only for Forge, and it's called Forge Storage. It's a special place, long-term storage place, where you can put your data against some object or independent of any object, and which stored only in particular instance where your Forge app is installed. That's why this option of the storing your data is much more secure than entity properties. So only Forge app, your Forge app, is able to access the storage data of your app, no anyone else. App store the data in particular storage of particular cloud instance. So it means all the cloud instances are separated from each other, and the users cannot mix the data of another instances. And there are no REST API to access your data directly with any permission. So it means if your app allows to access data with some additional permission checks, no anyone could skip these checks. You have two options to store the data. It's a key-value storage and custom entity storage option. They're very different. They very the same and very different at the same time. Key-value is absolutely the same like entity property. You have key, you have value, you can put as many data you like, and all the keys are stored in the same namespace. Custom entity allows you to create separated namespaces for every custom entity, but it has so many limitations, which I will mention later. So sounds like it's not recommended to use it, or you should definitely understand that you need exactly custom entity storage, and standard key value storage is not enough. Also, you have the option to encrypt the data. So you can store encrypted data in your storage, and it means the data will be put in the special place, not the standard Forge storage, and you will not be able to see this data somehow unencrypted. The limitations of the maximum size of the value is much bigger than in NT properties. Still, you can't store some big attachments or whatever, but 240 kilobytes sounds better than 32 only, like in NT properties. What else? Limits. Limits, it's something that, again, very painful, still very painful, and not so clear to understand, because in Forge storage you have limits for invocations, for read, write, delete operations, and for amount of data is stored. And you can reach the limit with any of these options at any time. We will have a look at the limits a bit later. Also, custom entity storage is very, let's say, fragile. So if you create it once, you cannot modify it. You cannot change name of the property inside your entity. You cannot delete entity, custom entity if it's already created, and many other limitations, which makes the usage of custom entities very unsecure for you as developer. And it's currently recommended to use key value option as much as it possible. Use cases. And even with these limitations, you still able to use it for any long-term storage needs that you have in your app. Let's say you are managing some custom templates, you can store them inside Forge storage. Of course, if the limitations, the limits which you have are fine for the content of your templates. You can store it for your configuration, for some data against issues, users, projects, whatever. And in the most of the cases, Forge storage is the recommended way to store your data inside Forge apps. A few words about the limitations. So Forge storage allows you to store the data inside any Forge app like Jira or Confluence, and you need to know about the limitations. Limitations are related to capacity of your storage, invocation count of your storage, like delete operations, query operations, read operations, and also custom entities has some special limits which you also need to know, what could be indexed, what not, and so on. And it's not quite easy to understand, is it enough for your case or not? The best option which I could suggest here, start using it, test it with your expected user activity, and check the limits reached and the error logs of your Forge app to find out, are you reached the limits or are still fine, and keep on using this option. One more, which we didn't mention inside pros of or advantages of Forge storage usage option, is the data residency, because out of the box you have this option. I did mention it just because you have the same for NT properties, means where your instance is located, all the data will be located. It's the same for NT properties, and now it works the same for Forge apps. At least could work the same for Forge apps. It means that if app is able to enabled for data residency. All the data stored inside your app with for storage also will be located in the same location as all the Jira Cloud data or Confluence Cloud data. And now let's talk about another options which you have, because entity properties and storage for storage are the most popular, but you should know that you have a few more which are less popular but still could be very useful in some cases. First of all, your Forge app is able to store data inside attachments. So it means that you can put any data inside page attachments or issue attachments, if you're talking about app for Jira. And of course, the biggest benefit here, it's the size of the data which you store inside attachment could be much higher than in Forge storage, and depends only on the limit of the maximum attachment limit per instance. But in most of the cases, it's dozens of megabytes, and you can store a lot of data, but against of particular issue or page. And this is the limitation of this option, of course, because you cannot put data, you cannot store attachment against project or user or dashboard or gadget or whatever. It's always related to particular issue or page in Confluence. And also very annoying limitation of this option, that every time when you upload a new version of your attachment, it will add new history log entry. So it means it will be in the history of your issue or in the history of your Confluence page. The attachment, every new upload of the attachments, every change for attachment will produce a new version, which is not good and could be too much for some cases. But still, if you need to store a lot of data against particular content, it's one of the best options. A few very popular apps on the marketplace, let's say it like this, without names, using exactly this option to store huge diagrams and other content inside particular attachment in Confluence pages or issues. And one more option that you have is to call external application or external database. Actually, you are able to do it with the special egress permissions, special allowance, which you need to declare inside your manifest YAML and say, hey, my app is going to connect this website, URL, or whatever, and will send and receive data from this application. It opens for you unlimited possibilities for integrations, but could be unsecure from the user point of view. So if your app will be shared and distributed through marketplace, and users will see that your app is able to connect third-party applications and multiple applications, for them it could be the sign that it could be sign that your app could send any instance data to third-party application, which is not good and maybe not allowed by some security policy and so on. But if you have already a third-party application which you would like to integrate with, the remote connection, remote calls is exactly what you need, and you can even use it as a database for any content which your app is using for Jira and Confluence. Which option to use depends on the needs, and you always free to use one option or combine multiple options for different needs. For example, if your app is managing some templates, reports, or whatever, you could store it inside Forge storage. If you would like to save some user-related configurations which are not so important and always could be overwritten, and you can lose it, and you can overwrite. You can always replace it with default values without any problems. Anti-properties perfect place for this. For something very huge and which takes a lot of space, attachment could be a good idea, and you can store JSON files or XML files of any size, almost any size, inside issue or page attachments. And for third-party integrations, for your own database, remote calls, exactly what you need. As always, links to all the possibilities, all the pages which I show in the video will be in description for this video, and example of usage of a few of this method I hope we will discuss in the next videos. Thank you for your time. Bye bye.